Hello peeps, welcome back to Big Deck Player with me, Matt Sparks. On today's video, we are taking a look at a Warlock deck, and you might be thinking, but hang on a minute, you don't normally do Warlock decks. That's right, I don't. Because normally it's the same deck, because it's either a Handlock or it's a Zoolock. And that seems to be the only main ones that get used. But this one is a bit different, and this is called the DeathwingLock. Right, so here is the deck. There's quite a lot of cards in this deck. There's not too many multiples, so I'm going to try and get through this as quickly as possible, but give you an idea of how it works. So let's start off at the top. We have one Power Overwhelming. Now this can be used for all sorts of things. The best way to play this deck is to apply early aggression and early pressure, but keeping board control. So doing an even amount of damage to the face of your opponent, but also trying to maintain that board control as much as possible so to set you up for the mid and late game. It's not a zoo deck. It starts off like a zoo deck, but as I say, you want to try and retain board control as best as possible. So Power Overwhelming will allow you to do that. Abusive Sergeant, again, this is a nice way to buff something to be able to retain board control, especially against those nasty spider tanks that have got 4 health. If you've only got something on the board that's only got 2 attack, putting an Abusive Sergeant on it you can use that to get rid of it. We have 2 Flame Imps because it's a Warlock deck, so you should probably have Flame Imps because they're pretty cool. And we have 2 Direwolf Alphas. Now, if you've got nothing on the board and your only option is to either play a Direwolf Alpha or play nothing at all, then play the Direwolf Alpha. Otherwise, you kind of only want to play it when you're about to attack. So if you've got minions on the board, don't put it down if you're not attacking that turn. Only put it down when you're about to attack. Also, as I mentioned before, having that extra attack can mean that you can trade better. Trading up is what you want to aim for as much as possible. 1 Haunted Creeper, because Haunted Creeper is pretty cool for trading up, and especially as you get the 2/1/1 spiders afterwards, they can be pretty useful. 1 Ironbeak Owl. Now, I've noticed recently that silences are becoming a bit more useful than maybe they were before. With the introduction of more mechs with death rattles to summon other creatures, you might want to put in another Ironbeak Owl. What you swap it out for is entirely up to you, but you may want another one. 2 Nerubian Eggs. Now this combos quite nicely with Power Overwhelming, and a 4/4 Nerubian is nothing to be sniffed at. So if anything, the Nerubian Egg will act as like a soft taunt temporarily, or it might suck up a silence early game for you to be able to use other things. Being able to have your Haunted Creeper without getting silenced or other things that are in the deck could be quite useful. We have 1 Big Game Hunter, for obvious reasons, really. I don't think I really need to explain why you need a Big Game Hunter in your deck. I think if you're not running a Big Game Hunter in your deck at the moment, then you should probably think about doing that. When it comes to mulliganing, or when you mulligan, I always say mulliganing, but I don't think that's the correct term. When you mulligan, you want to aim for stuff like Flame Imps, Haunted Creepers, Nerubian Egg. They're the 3 main things that you want to try and get. We have 1 Earthen Ring Farseer for a little bit of healing. You can use this to heal yourself, you can use this to heal other minions so that they can trade more. I like using it when you get your 4/4 Nerubian, using that to kill off something and then bringing out the Earthen Farseer to then heal the Nerubian, and meaning it can trade a bit more, which is fantastic. So don't just think that this is only here to heal you. We have 1 Harvest Golem. You might be thinking, only 1? That seems a bit strange. Yes, but there are lots of single cards in this deck. It's a very versatile deck as a result of having only single cards in there rather than having lots of duplicates. We have a Shattered Sun Cleric. Again, this is another card that allows you to trade up. And that's what you need to do with this deck. Don't just, if you're trading a Flame Imp for something that costs 3 mana, then that's fine. But if you're trading a 3 mana for a 3 mana, then that's probably not quite as good. We do have 2 Shadow Flame. This is pretty much the only kind of spell, apart from your Power Overwhelming, this is the only spell in the deck. So bear that in mind. Again, nice combo with Power Overwhelming. Should you have lots of things on the board that have all got a reasonable amount of health, putting Power Overwhelming on something, which is going to die anyway because it's got Power Overwhelming on it, and then you can use Shadow Flame to then destroy everything on your opponent's board and laugh maniacally as you do so. 1 Dark Iron Dwarf, again, giving you your extra minions an extra attack, so you can trade up, so that's fantastic. 2 Defender of Argus to slow down your opponent should you get in a bit of a sticky situation. If you're getting a bit overwhelmed, then 2 Defender of Argus are there to help relieve that a little bit. Also, because they're buffing your minions, it can mean that you can trade up as well. Regardless of the taunt, it means you can still trade up. As we mentioned earlier about the mechs with Death Rattle, we've got 2 of our own here with the piloted shredders. These are great. The only problem is that you never know what you're going to get, and I'm dreading the day that one of these gets killed and I have board control and he summons a Doomsayer and then my board gets wiped. We have 1 Senjin Shieldmaster to try and reduce any incoming attacks as much as possible, leaving your other minions free to either do damage to your enemy or to try and retrieve board control. If we scroll down a little bit, we have an antique heal bot, because you're playing a Warlock, so you're going to need a little bit of health from life taps and stuff, and the Flame Imps. I mean, the 2 Flame Imps themselves do 6 damage to you, so having an antique heal bot is probably going to be quite useful. Right, now we get into some of the bigger boys. We have Fugen and we have Stalag. Most people, because of the stuff that you've already put out on the board, people are likely to have used their 1 silence, because, as I say, a lot of people only run the 1 silence, same as they only run the 1 big game hunter. So, hopefully, neither of these guys get silenced. If the first one gets silenced, doesn't matter, as long as the second one that you put out doesn't get silenced. We have a Sludge Belcher. Again, you could put this out before you put either Fugen or Stalag out, and I hope that if they're going to use a silence, he might get silenced. But because you've got those 2 Nerubian eggs, if you get them fairly early, there's a good chance that any silences your opponent has, they will suck that up. Obviously, if you're against a Druid, there's a very good chance they'll have at least 2 silences with their Keeper of the Grove. 6 mana, we've got a Cairn Bloodhoof, because he's awesome, and he will always trade well, because he's essentially an 8-10, just in 2 sections. So, for 6 mana, it's a great card, and I don't see him played that often anymore, but I think he's still a very, very good card. At 8 mana, we have Sneed's Old Shredder. 5/7 for 8 isn't too great, but he can usually trade fairly well, and you can usually get at least 2 for 1 just out of the Old Shredder, and then obviously when he dies, who knows what you'll get. It could be literally any legendary in the game, so who knows? Who knows what will happen? And then finally, the namesake of the deck, Deathwing. Deathwing doesn't get played very often, but I think if it was going to get played, being played in a Warlock deck is probably the best way to do it, because quite often you can manage your flow of cards a lot easier. And obviously, late game, when it gets to like turn 10, ideally you don't want to have too many other minions on the board, and you don't want too many minions in your hand, which you can control to a degree because of life tap. If you're getting close to turn 10 and you've already got Deathwing in your hand, you might not want to life tap too much, because you don't want to discard like all your cards. But having stuff like Fugen and Stalag on the board, even Sneed's Old Shredder, if Sneed's Old Shredder is a bit damaged, put Deathwing out, because Deathwing will destroy them, and then you'll get your Thaddeus from your Stalag or Fugen, and you'll also get your legendary from Sneed's Old Shredder, and then all of a sudden your opponent has got a lot of problems on his hand, because you'll have a Deathwing, you'll have a Thaddeus, so you'll have a 12-12, an 11-11, and then whatever you get from Sneed's Old Shredder, which in that situation it'll probably be like Blood Mage Thalmos or something. But yeah, it's pretty cool. So just bear in mind when you do play Deathwing that it destroys everything that's on the board, including your opponent's stuff, and it also will discard everything that you've got in your hand, which is not unusual for Warlocks, because stuff like Soulfire and Succubus and such. So just remember that when you're playing Deathwing, that everything that in your hand will disappear. Obviously, if it's turn 10 and you've got stuff like Haunted Creepers or Flame Imps, you probably don't really want them anyway at that point, because you're looking to finish off your opponent. So if you've got a couple of like really low cost cards that are not going to be that useful, then don't worry too much. Obviously, if you haven't used your Nerubian eggs by then, put your Nerubian eggs out first. Chances are you'll get 2/4/4 Nerubians out of it, so that's pretty cool. So, that's the deck. That is the deck. It's a pretty cool one. I am liking it. It's a bit different from most other Warlock decks that you see nowadays, which is kind of why I wanted to show you. It's had a lot of attention already, so chances are you've probably already seen this deck in action somewhere. As per usual, I will put a link in the description, which will take you to Hearthstone, where you'll find this deck. It's already got a really good write-up, which it looks fantastic, and it's done to great detail, so you should really check that out as well. Give it a plus rating. If you play this deck, let me know how you get on. If you make any videos using this deck, feel free to link them to me via Twitter, and I will be sure to check them out. If there are any decks that you'd like me to spotlight in future, as per usual, leave a comment in the comment section or tweet me, and I'll check them out and possibly feature them in a future episode. Thanks very much for watching. I will see you next week for some more Big Deck Playa. Thanks again. Bye bye.